It happened on a quiet night when the neighborhood felt almost too still. Ryan was on his porch with a half-finished beer, scrolling through nothing on his phone. When Margaret walked up, her heels barely touched the wooden steps, but somehow the air shifted. Margaret was 50. Everyone knew that, but the way she carried herself made numbers feel irrelevant. Her eyes, though they betrayed something. A weight. Margaret sat beside him without asking. Close. So close that Ryan caught the faint scent of her perfume. The one that always lingered longer than she did. For a moment, Margaret said nothing, only looked out into the darkness as if searching for courage in it. Then, with a voice that cracked in the middle, Margaret whispered, "I'm depressed. I'm 50 and I'm lonely." Ryan didn't laugh. Ryan didn't know what to say. The words hung between them like glass about to shatter. Ryan's instinct was to break the tension, so he forced a smile and said lightly, "Then marry me." Margaret's head turned slowly. The look she gave him didn't belong to a joke. It was sharp, dangerous, and for one insane heartbeat, Ryan thought she might lean in and kiss him. Ryan's pulse raced, his throat went dry. Margaret didn't move, but the silence was worse than any touch. Thick, suffocating, electric. Finally, Margaret laughed. But it wasn't joy. It was bitter, low, like a secret that never healed. "You don't know what you're saying," Margaret murmured. Her hand brushed Ryan's on the bench. Not fully, just the softest stroke. A flicker of warmth gone almost before he registered it. Still, Ryan's skin burned where she touched him. Ryan wanted to grab her hand back, hold it, prove he wasn't joking. But before he could, Margaret pulled away, eyes flashing with something between warning and invitation. "Be careful with words like that," Margaret said. "One day you might regret them." The way Margaret stood, slow, deliberate, as if giving him time to stop her, made Ryan's chest tighten. Ryan didn't. Ryan just watched frozen as Margaret walked into the shadows of her yard. For a moment, Ryan swore she glanced back. The porch light caught her profile. Her lips parted as if she almost said something more. Almost. Then Margaret was gone. Ryan sat there long after, the echo of her confession replaying in his head. Depressed, 50, lonely. And the way Margaret looked at him when Ryan said, "Marry me," it wasn't a look he could unsee. That night, lying in bed, Ryan couldn't sleep. Ryan's mind kept replaying her voice, the brush of her hand, the ghost of her perfume still clinging to his shirt. Ryan wondered if she'd heard the tremor in his tone, the way his joke wasn't really a joke at all. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the nerves and confusion, one thought pulsed like a forbidden secret. If Margaret asked him again, really asked, Ryan wasn't sure he'd be able to say no. The next morning felt unreal, like Ryan had dreamt the whole thing. But when Ryan stepped outside, there Margaret was watering her flowers in the yard as if last night had never happened. Sunglasses, perfect hair pulled back, crisp blouse, cold, untouchable. Ryan tried to act casual. "Rough night?" Ryan asked. Ryan's voice cracked slightly, betraying him. Margaret didn't answer right away. Margaret let the water spray lazily over the roses, droplets catching the sunlight. Then, without looking at him, Margaret said, "Forget what I told you. Forget what you said." It was a command, not a request. But instead of backing down, Ryan grinned. "What if I don't want to?" That made Margaret finally turn. Margaret lowered her sunglasses, eyes blazing with something that wasn't anger. "Not exactly. Do you even understand what you're playing with?" Margaret's words were sharp, but the way Margaret stepped closer contradicted them. Ryan froze. Margaret was right there. Inches. Her perfume hit him again, stronger in daylight. Intoxicating. Ryan's heart thudded so hard he thought she might hear it. Margaret leaned forward slightly, just enough for him to feel the brush of her breath against his cheek. "Do you really want to know what it's like to be with a woman twice your age?" Margaret whispered. Every nerve in Ryan's body screamed yes. Ryan's lips parted, ready to answer. But before he could, Margaret let out a sudden laugh and stepped back. The distance felt like a slap. "You're too naive," Margaret said, shaking her head. "You wouldn't last a day." Ryan should have walked away. Ryan should have said something smart. Instead, Ryan stared at her, burning with something he couldn't hide. Margaret noticed. Of course, Margaret did. That sly smile tugged at her lips, the one that dared him to break every rule he thought he had. Then, just as Ryan started to breathe again, Margaret leaned in once more, closer than before. Her fingers brushed Ryan's sleeve. Light, fleeting, but enough to make his skin prickle. Ryan swore Margaret was about to kiss him right there in broad daylight where anyone could see. But no, at the very last moment, Margaret pulled away, straightened her blouse, and said in a tone almost mocking, "If you're not scared, come over tonight." Margaret left him standing in the yard with his pulse racing, his body tight with anticipation and frustration. It was cruel, deliberate, and yet Ryan couldn't think of anything else the whole day. That night couldn't come fast enough. When the evening finally came, Ryan's hands wouldn't stop shaking. Ryan told himself he was only curious, that it didn't mean anything. But deep down, Ryan knew that was a lie. Ryan was walking into something he might never walk out of the same. Margaret's door opened before he even knocked. Margaret was already waiting. The hallway behind her was dim, lit only by flickering candles on a side table. Her dress caught the glow, deep red, silky, clinging to her in ways that made Ryan's breath falter. Margaret didn't smile. Margaret just looked at him, steady, unblinking, as though weighing whether he was really brave enough to step inside. Ryan did. Ryan's pulse was a hammer in his throat. The door shut behind him with a soft click that sounded louder than thunder. Music drifted from a speaker. Slow, old, something that made the air heavy. Margaret poured wine into 2 glasses. Her movements deliberate, graceful, almost rehearsed. When Margaret handed him mine, her fingers brushed Ryan's too long to be accidental. Ryan's grip nearly failed. "Relax," Margaret said, her lips curving. "You look like a boy about to steal candy." "I feel like one," Ryan admitted, his voice lower than he expected. Margaret laughed softly, shaking her head, and then, without warning, stepped close. Too close. The heat from her body seeped into him. Margaret began to move with the music, slow swaying. "Dance with me," Margaret murmured. Ryan froze. Ryan's glass trembled in his hand. Margaret didn't wait for an answer. Margaret set her own glass aside and gently tugged Ryan's away, placing it on the table. Then her hands slid to Ryan's shoulders, guiding him like he was her student. Her face hovered near Ryan's, close enough that he could see the faintest crease near her eyes, the glint of candle light on her lips. Margaret leaned in as though she might claim him right there, and every part of Ryan screamed, "Yes!" But Margaret didn't. Not yet. Margaret lingered, pulling him into the rhythm, teasing him with inches of space that felt like miles. Ryan's chest ached from holding back. And then, just as her lips brushed the edge of Ryan's, the doorbell rang. The sound cut through the room like a blade. Margaret froze, her eyes widening, then instantly hardened. "Don't move," Margaret whispered fiercely, pushing him toward the curtains. Ryan's heart pounded as he stumbled behind them, hidden in shadows. Margaret opened the door, her voice smooth, casual. "Oh, hi. I wasn't expecting you." It was a woman's voice that answered. Familiar, a friend? Ryan couldn't see her clearly, only the outline. They chatted light, meaningless words, but Ryan caught the stiffness in her tone. The quick glance Margaret threw toward where he hid. Every second felt like hours. Ryan stood there, pressed against the wall, the scent of wax and her perfume thick around him, knowing if the visitor stepped inside, he'd be caught. Finally, the door shut. Silence. Then the sharp click of her heels crossing the floor. The curtain rustled and Margaret's face appeared inches from Ryan's. Her breath was uneven. Her eyes burned. For a long moment, they just stared at each other in the dim glow. It would have been so easy, so impossibly easy to let go and close that last inch. But Margaret whispered instead, low and trembling, "Do you see now why this is dangerous?" And in that instant, Ryan understood exactly why he couldn't stay away. The day after, Margaret avoided him. No texts, no accidental meetings in the yard. Ryan thought maybe that night had broken something forever until his phone buzzed. A single message. Meet me at the river bridge. Sunset. Ryan nearly dropped the phone. When Ryan arrived, Margaret was already there, leaning against the railing, the fading sun painting fire in her hair. Margaret looked untouchable again, calm, composed, but her hands clutched the rail too tightly, betraying the storm inside. "You shouldn't be here," Margaret said without looking at him. "You asked me to come." Finally, Margaret turned, and in her eyes, Ryan saw it. The same hunger she kept trying to bury. "I should hate you," Margaret whispered. "I should walk away. You make me feel things I swore I'd buried years ago." The wind picked up, scattering her scarf. Instinctively, Ryan caught it before it blew into the water. Their hands collided, gripping the fabric together. That single touch jolted him, stronger than electricity. Margaret didn't let go. Neither did Ryan. People passed by them, couples, joggers, a family with kids. Every second risked exposure. Ryan's chest pounded with the thrill of it. Her hand clutching Ryan's in plain sight. Their bodies angled just close enough that anyone could mistake them for lovers. "You don't understand," Margaret said, her voice shaking. "If I let this happen, if I let you happen, I won't survive it." Ryan stepped closer. So close he could see the tremble of her lips. The way Margaret fought herself. "Then don't fight." Margaret's eyes closed for a fraction of a second, and Ryan thought, "This is it. This is the moment." Her lips parted, Ryan's inches away. Ryan swore the whole world stopped. But at the very last second, Margaret jerked back, tearing her hand away as though it burned. The loss hit him like a punch. "Don't," Margaret hissed, pacing, breath ragged. "You're too young. I'm too broken. People would never forgive me." "Then let them talk." Ryan shot back. "Let them hate. Why should it matter?" Margaret froze slowly. Margaret turned back, and for the first time, tears glittered in her eyes, not weakness. Rage at herself for wanting what she shouldn't. Margaret stepped right up to him, her face inches from Ryan's. Voice a razor whisper. "If we cross this line, there will be no way back." And then in the fading sunlight, her hand brushed Ryan's cheek. The world tilted, narrowed, spun down to that single forbidden touch. Ryan's breath caught. If Margaret leaned just 1 inch closer, it would all be over. But Margaret didn't. Margaret dropped her hand almost violently and spun away, her shoulders shaking. Ryan stood frozen, torn between chasing her and letting her run. The river roared beneath them, echoing the storm in his chest. For the first time, Ryan realized the truth. This wasn't a game anymore. This was war between desire and fear, between what they wanted and what the world would allow. And Ryan wasn't sure which of them was strong enough to win. It was almost midnight when Ryan heard the knock. Soft, hesitant, like Margaret wasn't sure if she wanted him to answer. Ryan's chest tightened. Ryan already knew who it was. When Ryan opened the door, Margaret stood there. No perfect hair, no polished smile, just her raw undone with eyes that looked like they hadn't stopped crying. For the first time, Margaret seemed younger and older all at once. "Can I come in?" Margaret asked. Her voice was fragile, almost breaking. Ryan stepped aside. Margaret entered slowly, like the air itself was too heavy. Margaret didn't sit. Margaret didn't even take off her coat. Margaret just stood there staring at the floor, her fingers twisting together. "I can't keep doing this," Margaret whispered. The words pierced him. Ryan's throat went dry. "Doing what?" Pretending. Margaret finally looked up, and the force of her gaze nearly crushed him. "Pretending I don't want you. Pretending this doesn't scare me to death. Pretending age, judgment, everything else matters more than this." Before Ryan could respond, Margaret crossed the room in 2 quick steps. Her hand rose to Ryan's cheek, trembling, but steady enough to make his breath catch. "You've ruined me," Margaret whispered, "and I hate you for making me feel alive again." Her lips hovered inches from Ryan's. So close, the tension burned hotter than fire. Ryan's hands wanted to pull her in to erase the distance. Every nerve screamed, "Yes!" But Margaret didn't close the gap. Margaret lingered, torturing them both in the unbearable almost. Tears slipped down her cheek, catching the light. "Tell me something," Margaret said softly, her voice breaking. "That night on the porch when you smiled and said I should marry you. Were you joking?" The question slammed into him. Ryan's heart pounded so loud he could barely breathe. Ryan opened his mouth, but no sound came. Margaret searched Ryan's face desperately, as if the wrong answer would destroy her. "Because," Margaret whispered, her forehead leaning into Ryan's, "if you weren't joking, if you truly meant it, then I'm already lost." Ryan couldn't move. Ryan couldn't speak. The silence stretched unbearable, every second thick with the weight of everything unsaid. Her lips trembled closer, so close Ryan felt the heat of them. 1 inch. Just 1 inch and the world would change forever. But Ryan froze and Margaret waited.